everybody. Welcome. Welcome to another WineShark Wednesday. It is I, your host, the WineShark, here with another weekday break from the real world. Talk about wine a little bit today. Hope everybody is doing well, starting themselves a good week. I'm going to pour myself a glass here because it is my own indulgence time. And today we're going to talk just a little bit about some wine news, some things I've been thinking about and wondering about, kind of an editorial show. And then we're going to review some Bonterra. We're going to talk a little bit about Bonterra today. And we're going to talk about Cab Sauv and organic farming and biodynamics and stuff. So kind of looking forward to it, looking a lot of fun. And then, all right, so look at that. We got folks joining us. Let's see that Dave and Mary are here. So, they got a Bonterra Cabernet in the cellar. So there they go. Going to be drinking the same thing. Love it. Well, we're going to find out how awesome it is. So anyway, just talked a little bit about just some things in the news. It's been kind of keeping up and the usual kind of industry stuff that I see here and there. And a couple things just caught my attention I wanted to make some commentary on. So on the business side of things, let's start with the wine business. Always kind of looking now from a being in the industry professional part of it, although I'm not in the winemaking part of the business, it always has an effect on what I do. And in fact, I think as consumers, it affects a lot of what we see and happening in the grocery store aisles, in our wine stores, and everywhere else. So one of the things that caught my attention was some names that were fairly familiar of some closures that are going on right now for a couple of different reasons. So first, Clos du Bois out of Sonoma up in they have a Geyserville location, and was kind of a famous early 80s name that had gone from being a kind of a premium brand into a grocery store level brand. Well, they're closing their doors. The Gallo purchased them from Constellation Brands, so they went from one major producer to another major producer, and basically they decided to lay off about 32 of their 37 workers. During the interviews with the employees that had been let go, one of the things they talked about was an overall drop in sales. So that their sales had dropped from something like 4.5 million to about 1.8 million during this rough interregnum time that we've been dealing with the whole pandemic and all of that. So an interesting concept of seeing one go from a very big winery to a very big owner to a different big owner, and seeing some of the business politics that go into the behind the scenes work. Now, of course, Gallo didn't really comment much on what was going on, and they are offering some internal position and very nice, some separation packages for the employees that we're dealing with. But it's kind of a sign of our times that when you're seeing businesses like this make big shifts and changes like that. Although the interesting thing was, thinking about Clos du Bois as a name that I'm very familiar with and have seen for over years, that that they only had 37 employees, and that's still considered a pretty medium-sized to large-sized winery, a winery that can support a national level brand of 500,000 cases kind of a year kind of thing. And so seeing that just basically just a token staff to kind of keep the site going is kind of a shock, I suppose, just overall. The reason that by itself was just kind of an outlier, but then later on in the week I saw a thing that Sebastiani has been closing, and Sebastiani was a winery that I grew up visiting right off the square in Sonoma, and it's really kind of a classic name in the world of wine. So Sebastiani is somebody that many people know. So both of these brands, though, they're closing. So actually, with Sebastiani, to finish that up, they're actually just closing the production facility portion that is in downtown Sonoma. And if you've ever been there, and actually, if I had, I would show you a map, but I want to mess with getting the tab open for you here. The winery is actually located in a very urban part of Sonoma. So the reason that they're closing it, according to them, is that they are just relocating to their new Ferrari Carano facility that they purchased a few years back. So they're going to take production of the wines and just move them from somewhere else, because getting the trucks in and out to actually do the production at the place was really kind of inconvenient. In fact, there was an issue I read where they actually ran over a fire hydrant and had to have it replaced from some of the neighbors in the residential area. And so it was just increasingly apparent that the city has outgrown the winery being where it is. And they the overall reason for the shift was more out of efficiency than out of a not out of a falling out of love with the location or falling out of love with the name. So the name is still going to be around, which is good because again, that's a very old California wine name and somebody that makes some pretty good juice, and I really wish them all and well. As part of the other articles that I read regarding both of these kind of things combined and then what was going on, because there was 3 different articles from 3 different places, and one of them talked about specifically the challenges in this particular wine market. That overall, what we're seeing is that in different segments of the wine economy, you're seeing different shifts. Well, the $15 to $25 range has been the biggest place where you're seeing growth. The grocery store labels, like some of the stuff that Sebastian and Clos du Bois, make in this $7 to $10, $11 range, have been dropping off for several years. So there's this shift around to even Gallo and Constellation brands, the big names that own these guys, have been shifting up the gears from very large, very inexpensive, mass-produced wines in the even the $3 to $4 to $5 to $6 bottle range, all the way into at least a market where that $15 to $25 range is, which, if you guys have been following me for any length of time, you'll know is kind of what I refer to as the sweet spot for good quality wines. But that also makes me wonder about wine inflation, that if some of these brands that used to be grocery store, are they increasing their quality enough to make that $15 to $25 product number have to go up again? Not simply because I think it's 2 things. One of it's just an economic issue, but the other factor is if you're just putting the same juice in a more expensive price tag on it, doesn't make it better wine, and it kind of dilutes the overall value. It's literal wine inflation rather than just price inflation. So, you've got this whole idea where, oh look, we think we can get away with selling this because we have a new name or we have a brand that can support it. So, we'll talk about some more of those factors later. I've actually got an idea for an article I want to kind of do some research on to help to kind of get things going in that. But anyway, just some things to think about as far as one of the things I've been struggling with in my professional career, but I think even some consumers care about, and that is where does their wine actually come from? Who actually owns it? Who's making some of the decisions? Does it taste the same when it's bought up by a big company? How much do they get their fingers involved? Is it just a matter? Is it a thing where you can get a better product because big economies of scale offer you cheaper options? For instance, one of the things I know, Gallo owns their own bottling facility. They make all of their own bottles in-house. They don't have to purchase bottles from anybody. Part of their own company makes bottles for them, which allows them to get very inexpensive prices because they're buying for all these wineries, right? So economy of scale working for their favor. So if you get picked up by Gallo, then your bottle price gets cheaper. Hey, that's a couple % off the bottom line that you become more profitable because you're saving money over there. But are they making creative decisions? Are they making decisions about what goes into the bottle, not just the type of bottle? So it's always kind of a concern that you want to kind of keep your finger on the pulse of, because I've had several brands in my lifetime that used to be independently owned, that made a big name and label for themselves, and now no longer really fall into that category. And it makes me wonder that the juice doesn't taste the same in the bottle anymore. So something to be thinking about as far as the wine business is concerned. Another article that I caught from VinePair, separate topics, shifting changes here, is the concept of influencer marketing. And I had talked about this before a couple of times. This time specifically, the article was about sexism in the industry, and specifically sexism in articles and anti-influencer speak, right? The idea that a lot of the vitriol that was being focused was basically being focused because this was a sex sells kind of market, and the people were being told were basically worthless and just secondary non-celebs were all directed at women. And I got to be thinking about just the topic at all, and it's something that in the industry itself we're trying to deal with and really just come clean about how our industry practices are going. We've talked about this in the industry overall, but going back to just the concept of influencer marketing, and something that I, as a former professional marketer, am thinking about, and that is, I have a personal stake in the affair, because to the extent that I'm doing this for you right now, although, I do not see myself as an influencer, nor do I really choose to even, really want to even thinking about that. I definitely see my role in the industry as an educator. And though I understand how marketing works, and if I was on the business of selling wine, you've got to engage in the things that are in existence, and the fact that influencer marketing is a thing. It works, especially when we talk about things that are perceived as luxuries. So whether it's perfume or fast cars or fashion or food, wine is no different in those things, in the sense that people seeing sexy people do sexy things is something that changes people's mind about what it is that they want to do. What they wear, what they say, what they listen to, what they drink matters to a lot of the population. Personally, I've never felt a big draw to that. I've always seen that idea as very, very imaginatory slash, it's a whole lot of big fun dreams. I mean, but in that same way, this, maybe I'm not self-actualizing enough here. I don't see that as, ooh, I could be that person. I was much more apt to see myself as being, taking that to even one more level. I'd, rather captain the Millennium Falcon than be like, oh, look, I've got a yacht. So, depending on, it always seemed to me like a limitation of imagination, not an actualization of it. But that's just me. I understand, again, that I am not the market that I am always marketing to, nor am I being marketed to. However, I also seem to be sometimes lumped into the same bucket. Whether I want to do something on Instagram, for instance, puts me in a bucket with all of these people whose job it is to try and make Instagram their thing, to look good and get attention, and then ask brands to give them stuff so that they can shill for it, which is exactly the opposite of what I'm trying to do. This is the point where, wine education, getting you guys to feel a part of wine as part of your world, because wine is not a topic that has to be existence in your dreams. I've said many times, it's a grocery, not a luxury. Or actually, rather, it can be both. It can be something that's a day-to-day thing, and it also could be something that's the lifestyles of the rich and famous kind of stuff. I'm going to give you guys a quote from, and I've referred to several times, that Jay McInerney, as a wine writer, is somebody that's a favorite of mine. But in the preface to his book, The Juice, I'll read you the following quote, and I think it lines up very much with kind of how I feel. This is his quote. Some of the wines I write about here are costly and hard to find, but I believe it's one of the wine writer's duties, however arduous it might sound, to bring back news of the best and the rarest, just as it's the travel writer's duty to explore the exotic and remote destinations. Most readers of automotive magazines won't ever drive a Lamborghini or a Ferrari, and most wine drinkers will never hold a glass of Chateau Latour. But as an avid reader of Car and Driver, I'd hate to see it limit its coverage to sensible, affordable rides. No, I want a knowledgeable, badass driver to tell me what it's like to power the new Gallardo Superleggero through the Alps. So yes, there's some wine porn here. That quote about this book is so great, because there's a lot of wine in here that, as he says, I'm never going to have an opportunity to try. I don't run in those circles, and I don't work for a magazine professionally talking about wine. Not that I wouldn't jump at the opportunity, but that's also not my necessarily aspirational goal, what I've got. But on the flip side, by learning and being inspired by this, then that's the things I can go to seek out to get the best out of the wine world that I can. And that, I think, is where my world kind of exists, and hopefully Venn diagram somewhere with yours, is that what's the best part of your wine journey that you can experience? What's within your means, and to spend the best dollars that you can. Because if you're just going to sit there wondering why you can't afford, and you don't think you're never going to drive because you don't get to buy a Ferrari, well, you're shorting yourself a whole lot of fun there. So same thing. Just you're not going to drink just because you're not, happen to buy a Domaine Romani Conti, then blah blah. So anyway, influencers, comments they're on. Don't let the sexy people, don't get the sexy people down. There's lots of them on both sides of the spectrum. Don't let it be sexist. Meaning specifically, let's not be anti-women about it, because that happens to be a majority of them. But fact is, there's just as many wine influencers that I know that are men doing the same thing. Really just depends on what you want. And if you want to see cool people do cool stuff, Instagram's full of it. Me, you're probably going to see more food pictures than pictures of me trying to look cool in the Alps drinking booze. I mean, if I ever get there, you're definitely going to see a picture, but we'll see. Anyway, and then last but not least in the wine news world, I wanted to say my own little thing to Jim Clendenen. Jim Clendenen passed away this last week, and rather suddenly, if you don't know who the name is, he was famous for in the 1980s starting a winery called Au Bon Climat. And Jim Clendenen was an avatar of the Burgundian style of winemaking in California. He championed Pinot Noir and Chardonnay and the styles of the Burgundians of earlier harvesting, less ripe harvesting, preservation of nuance, and making these subtler, more elegant wines that and later on in time actually caught him a lot of flack from some of his contemporaries. So he's kind of that idea of if the herd's running this way, he's running the other way. Was also married to a lady named Morgan, though no longer married as of, and I don't know, 10, 20 years ago. She was also an equally awesome winemaker in her own right. She ran Cold Haven, of making Viognier and stuff, but an amazing winemaking family, and just a really cool gent who was always out there, very outspoken about what he wanted to see out of the wine world, influential within his own circles, and an absolute loss to the winemaking world. So raise a glass for Jim Clendenen when you get a chance, and hope that we see some more in our time, that are as equally as bold and innovative as he is. So anyhow, next up, it's the grocery store grab. So let's talk about some wine time. This was an interesting grocery store grab, but to get the appropriate spiel, for those that are unfamiliar with the grocery store grab, our premise is to get the best value per dollar for wines found at non-specialty and non-big box retailers. Many of us don't have the opportunity to shop at a fine wine store or have a big box store convenient, or maybe just out of necessity and our own convenience, we happen to shop at the grocery store. This is a particularly interesting environment to shop for wine because there's rarely anybody around to ask good questions. You're faced with a wide variety of labels, and most of them are trying to aim at you from a very big wine perspective. And so we want to make sure that we focus on high quality labeling and how to read a wine label to make sure that you know how to get what in the bottle is what you want to have in your glass before you ever swipe that card and purchase it for yourself. So I choose these without prior research, based on labels alone, and we're looking for a few key things on the label. We're looking about what's in the bottle, if it's a varietal grape and what particular varietal it is. If it's a blend, we like to see what percentages those blends of what types of grapes they use. We want to know where the grapes are grown. The more specific, the better. We want to know what the wine tastes like, using simple flavor words that every man can understand. Not just the idea of this wine tastes good, but specifically what does it taste like. And then of course, if they get extra bonus points if they do specific food pairings rather than just general ones. Although we're seeing that more and more doesn't really occur that much. So this week's selezione is Bonterra Cabernet Sauvignon. This caught my attention specifically because of the made with organic grapes written right on the front label. Very much going into this concept I've been talking about of support of the organic movement, natural wine, and biodynamic wine, which are actually three very, very different things. But just to sum it up, understanding that big, bold statement about organic grapes was something that caught my attention. I have spoken in several other shows about the concepts of fear-based marketing and the obsession with the wellness world and wellness marketing. So I was kind of caught, but just caught my thing. I liked the label as well. It was a name I hadn't heard of, and it was bright. You see on here, it's very simplistic overall, but then it's got this nice bright little color splotch, which really ties in and draws your idea to making sure you see that this is made organic. On the back of the label, it says the following: Bonterra was founded on a philosophy of farming organically, farming organically produces the purest, most flavorful fruit. The holistic approach balances the land and surrounding habitat of wasps, birds, and wildlife to produce wines of unmatched flavor and distinction. Although I don't know, man. Wasps in your wine is really weird for me. So anyway, our Cabernet Sauvignon offers hints of black pepper, vanilla spice, and rich berry plum flavors. And then signed by Jet Chishaki, the winemaker. So, and then the usual rest of the legalese that comes along with wine labels. So I thought that I said not only did I like what the label was saying, and I really was this whole idea of organic. They bothered to kind of explain why organic was important to them. That they believe there's a connection between quality of product and this. Also, I laughed when I saw the word wasps. And I'm like, it's bees. That's what you usually think of, right? Pollinators? No way, man. They've got murder hornets out there making sure that their wines stay organic. And then they've got the last and not least, they have their good single sentence at least on it offers black pepper, vanilla, spice, rich berry, plum flavors. We got flavor words. We're good to go. This is, by the way, so it says on here, this said it's bottled in Mendocino County. It is a California labeled wine, which means it can come from several different American viticultural areas. It doesn't have a specific area that it comes from rather. Although they do have, and so I did a little bit of research, of course, because I had to with this one. This is one where I was like, oh man, I really want to kind of see what's up with this particular. What is their concept behind organic? Because that was a big. I said no pun intended with the red flavor. It was a red flag, but I wanted to make sure that they were following through on that, not just throwing it on a label because, as one knows, you can charge more for something when you say it's organic, as well as you can if it's gluten-free, or it's this, or it's that, or it's the other thing. Those labels very much come along as marketing tools these days, but I actually went and so they have both organic and biodynamic wines. Now, biodynamic is a weird trigger word for me because the true origin of kind of the concept of biodynamics comes from a guy named Rudolf Steiner. And to quote again Jay McInerney again, he's a bit of a whack job. The ideas around biodynamicism in the full form have a lot to do with this a very holistic slash all enveloping principles, not only organic farming, but things like harvesting at very specific times, lunar cycles and solar cycles all have this stuff to do with when exactly you should do this whole, nature's this all encompassing, self-regulating and completely encapsulated biosphere. And while I think at a concept level that's kind of cool, there are some very weird practices, for instance, that kind of make you wonder whether this is more about ritual or more about science. And so, for instance, there's an example. One of the things you do for this is you take a cow's horn and pack it with manure from the cow and bury it in your vineyard. You bury this on the autumnal equinox. You let it sit over the entire winter, and then you dig it up on the spring equinox, and then you take what's left inside of it and you mix it with water and you spray it over the vineyard. Okay? Now, this is a quote from Steiner's book. You see, by burying the cow horn with the manure in it, Steiner says, we preserve in the horn the etheric and astral force that the horn was accustomed to reflect when it was on the cow. Because the cow horn is now outwardly surrounded by the earth, all the earth's etherizing and astralizing rays stream into its inner cavity. The manure inside the horn attracts those forces and is inwardly enlivened by them. If the horn is buried for the entire winter, the season when the earth is most inwardly alive, all this life will be preserved in the manure, turning the contents of the horn into an extremely concentrated, enlivening, and fertilizing force. Oh, really? Is that what we think? I can get behind the idea that you might share some bacteria and there's some reality between, the fact that plants and animals certainly have cycles that involve in nature that we don't necessarily see. But I don't know about no astralizing force. So Anyway, they have a few of these that are biodynamic vineyards that actually do this, but this is their simple, good old-fashioned version that is organic. So we're going to answer 3 questions with our tasting here today. We're going to want to talk about, is this wine well executed? Is it on style? And is it worth the price tag? Price tag of this, by the way, was listed at $16 pre-club price, only $14 with the club discount. If you guys happen to shop at a store, at a grocery store that has one of those, that's the way mine was. So basically, this is a $14 cab. High end of the low range, low end of the quality range, as we were speaking of earlier. So let's see how well it lines up with that particular note there. So color-wise, we are dead on in the classic deep garnet color that a cab ought to be having, right? So we know, because we know in advance what we're looking for and looking at here. This definitely has the right color band, dark and rich. Doesn't have a lot of State of the Tears or anything that's going on that says it's really like a whole lot of juice going on. Really big on the nose, as again, stylistically, one would expect it to be. Got some dark cherry, maybe some dark plum. And I can definitely see the vanilla spice thing that they're talking about. Vanilla spice usually comes on as a form of oaking. So we would have to see about what their oak program is. How much time do they spend in oak? How much time do they, how much of that is new oak, i.e. imparting flavor to the wine? That's always kind of a key factor there. Now the one I'm drinking right here is the 2018. The 2019 vintage is already out. So that would be a harvested in 19, vinified through 20, on sale in 21. Okay, so that's again that's a usual and typical amount of length of time. So this isn't a particularly young version of that. Yeah, the more I sort of get around there, there's more of a. I get a little hint of. I want to say. There's a little, is it almost a pipe tobacco smell to it, which in a Cabernet from California would not be unexpected, and in fact would, for one of this price point, would be quite welcome. A little bit more richness than just a simple fruit profile going on. Okay, it is a big, grippy wine. Tannin structure is full-bodied. Tannin structure that was all around the mouth kind of hits you hard with tannin first and doesn't do that great job of following it up with flavor. The flavor shifts more towards the dark cherry and I would say red plum range in the mouth. It's not as dense and dark, but the end of the palate starts finally kind of catching up with this more rich middle note, kind of a cocoa slash not even cocoa, that's not right. It's much more of that rotundone, cedar, dark pepper, black pepper thing. So it's got, again, all the flavor words so far that they've used on the bottle have appeared. I wish they were a little more restrained in their tannin profile. This would be an example where it's a very vibrant and very youthful wine, very aggressive for folks that don't like tannin profiles, that don't enjoy that sensation on their mouth, that astringency and that grip. They would steer well clear of this wine because this is a thing that would make their mouth just pucker right up. So if you do enjoy that, this has got it definitely has something to say. It does deliver finally in the fruit range, just delivers a little bit late. There's nothing really soft or nuanced about it. It doesn't seem to have much in the way of malolactic, so it doesn't have that velvety thing going on across your mouth. There's no acetyl and butter notes to things. So it is basically fruit and tannin, and that's it, which may be absolutely what their intent is here. So is it well executed? I'd say yeah. I mean, I think that it could have been a little softer handled in that way, that maybe this is going to get there. But for a $14 cab, this kind of has that thing where, oh, that's what you get when you don't pay for the big dollars to smooth things out. It doesn't tell us whether there's any blending going on in here, so maybe that's another thing that they may be missing out on. If they're doing 100% cab and they're not rounding off the edges with other small percentages of grapes, that may be the other reason you're getting that very monodimensional hammer. Is it on style? Yeah, I'd say for the price point that we're talking about here, in that that sub $15 Cabernet range, I wouldn't expect much more out of a one than this. This is definitely towards that end of the spectrum. We kind of know where it's from and what it price points at to know what style kind of is. And then of course everybody else has their own particular style, so it's actually kind of an odd question, but I prefer it rather than the idea of is it good? That's way too broad, and do I like it is even worse. So anyway, I definitely think that it is on style for a Cabernet at the price point. Is it worth the price tag? The real money question. And the answer there is maybe. I would rather spend $4 more, and I could get a Cabernet that I think is a lot more approachable. I mean, and I know that's the difference point between we're saying going out of the price point A and into price point B. But so if it had to at its price point, is it worth it? Yes. Okay, fine. It is well made for a $14 cab. But man, pay a couple more bucks and you can have a hell of a lot more cab in your glass. And I'm talking only like 3 or 4. So when it comes down to that, I think that this is an example where I want them to go the extra mile rather than. And maybe I need to look at the rest of their wine range. Maybe this is only their grocery store level version. Maybe they have a better version. But, several of the other grocery store names that I know that play in the Cabernet spectrum, hell, even the example that we had last week from Spyglass, I think was a better, more well-rounded one. Although it was, again, $3 to $4 more. So apparently that's what $3 or $4 to get you. Difference between this and that. So. I definitely want to come back with this with some food, see whether that tamps it down. This might be a perfect example of a wine that needs some food to sand off the rough edges. But so there you go, Bonterra Cabernet Sauvignon. Check out a bottle if you like, the rough stuff. We're not kink shaming here, but you know what I mean. And if not, check out some of the options that could be going on there. So good stuff. I mean, the other thing is, we're going to let this open up for a little while. I definitely get some of the fruit that's coming through on the end. So maybe it has just some potential. Maybe it just needs a little bit of air. One of the things I usually try not to do is decant my wines prior to showtime, only because of the issue of I want to taste what it tastes like when most people are going to be drinking it. Then maybe make the recommendation. So try this one out with a little decanting for air and see what things go on there. So. All right, give you guys some what's coming up and what's coming soon. At Scarborough Renaissance Festival this weekend, we're doing Wines Dianetta, which means Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, the wines of the Southern Cross. But unfortunately, many people don't get my sailing terms. So anyway, when I say Wines Down Under, they get it. But it's not just Australia. 2 wines from Australia, 2 wines from New Zealand, 2 wines from South Africa. And it's going to be a heck of a lot of fun to try some of these out. Ticketing reminder. Yes, we were probably sold out online. Always show up as early as you can, and I always have tickets available for sale on site. So we've been having I always get good questions as soon as people are saying, do you still have tickets? The answer is absolutely if you get there early. So next up online shows, 27 May, Will It Blend, Part 4. The amazing contributions of California to the red blend world. Red blends in the United States market have really come a long way in the last 10 years. Not only in acceptability, but flat out popularity. And we're going to talk a little bit about that with 2 examples from my particular past that I really, really enjoy and that kind of made the thing kind of spur and be possible. Well, we're going to tell the story of one, but we're going to have a different one. So anyway, then there's the upcoming in the Patreon world. I will be getting you guys a new what's the word I'm looking for? Survey. That's the word. A survey for the next topics for the online tastings to continue across the summer. Since we're out of our current list, this would be the last one that you guys chose. We will be ordering the next batch up for the rest of the summer, and so I'll get you guys voting in what order. But you'll look for that show in early June. I think it's the 6th or 7th. The 13th of June will be the Summer Splash down at Reunion Tower. So we will be beginning our summer series down there, and that's shifting to Sundays. So it's a little bit earlier in the day. It's about 5 to 7, so you can come and finish off your weekend with a glass of wine with me downtown. Heck of a lot of fun. All right. So in closing, I wanted to say thank you guys. Hope you guys, I'm always eager for your comments, questions, and suggestions down in the comments below here on YouTube. Love to hear from you guys. If you like what we're doing, like and subscribe. Share with a wine-loving friend. If you really like what we're doing, check us out over on Patreon. There's extra bonus content over there, some other cool things like recipes and wine reviews. I try and take all the wine reviews from the online shows and summarize them. I am catching up on my backlog right now, so a little patience from you guys, but don't worry, we'll get you guys all caught up soon. And so, guys, I want to say until next time, I have been your wine shark, and cheers. And now I'm going to see if I can master this final bit of streaming about when I see the delay go over there and when I actually end the stream. So hopefully, after I take a drink and it shows to me on YouTube, I'm done. Although I may be recording all of this and not even know it. All right. Cheers, guys.